sent to Francis Lemoyne. These are all copies of a handwritten note.
Although unacquainted with you personally, I feel it my duty to acquaint you confidentially of a circumstance which transpired here this morning, trusting my information may save a brother man from slavery. Wow. Trusting my information may save a brother man from slavery. Mr. McLean, former editor of the Argus of Wheeling, Virginia, was in my office this Wednesday morning and in conversation inquired who was U.S. Commissioner in Washington, Pennsylvania. What's a U.S. Commissioner?
U.S. commissioners were put in place to facilitate the return of fugitive slaves.
Oh my God. I did not know, he said. I suppose if you did, you wouldn't tell me, as one of our citizens wants to seize a slave of his there. He wouldn't tell me who the master was. Ugh. Please put your colored folks on their guard, especially fugitives from the neighborhood of Wheeling, Virginia. The bloodhounds are on the scent. The bloodhounds are on the scent. Is that literal or figurative?
Both.
Oh, wow. Yours in haste, J. Heron Foster. So J. Heron Foster was warning Dr. Francis Lemoyne, my 3 times great-grandfather, that a slave had escaped and that the master was coming to get him.
Yes. So this reminds us that Francis Lemoyne is connected to a community of people who are engaged in helping enslaved people find freedom.
So when this says, please put your colored folks on their guard.
I mean, he uses the term colored folk, right, which was very typical for the time period. But he's talking about fugitives who are still present in Washington, PA. And he's also talking about just African Americans who maybe were never enslaved, but they could easily be labeled or targeted and dragged into slavery.
So warn your colored folks, like if slave catchers are coming, anybody's fair game. Your word didn't matter if you were black.
How do you prove that you were not a slave? So this is written after 1850. With the Fugitive Slave Law in 1850, the federal government gave permission to slave owners to go anywhere.
Cross state lines, no problem.
North, south, didn't matter.
Called the Bloodhound Law after dogs used to hunt down escaped slaves, the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 was a federal law requiring that all runaway enslaved people be returned to their masters, even in the free states. U.S. commissioners that worked with slave owners had full authority to determine who was a former enslaved person and who was not. Accused escapees were denied trials to defend themselves, and citizens were pressured to turn in anyone they suspected of helping fugitive slaves.
Because this was a federal law, if you were found assisting...
Right. Were you committing a crime?
Yes, you were.
What was at risk? I mean, could you be put in jail?
Yes, you could. And you would be fined, and it could, in many ways, ruin you.
So this is encouraging, like in so many times in history, you know, for the neighbors to tell on the neighbors.
Sure.
You know, tell if you're there hiding a Jew. Tell, tell, tell. It's just, ugh.
So for anyone like Francis Lemoyne who stepped in to help a fugitive, you were putting your life at risk.
And your families.
And so these things, the fact that we know he was connected to the American Anti-Slavery Society, that he had abolitionist meetings at his house, that he was told to help fugitives who were escaping slavery.
He was absolutely part of the Underground Railroad.
Yeah, it's pretty safe to say that he was.
That's so great. That's so great. I'm so proud to have that somewhere in my background. So the Underground Railroad, as it were, was it like an Anne Frank kind of a situation?
We do know that fugitives came through this home and were harbored here, but there was much more to that. It was helping people secure employment, shuttling people further north. So we have Francis Lemoyne in the middle of this and warning them about slave catchers.
Wow. Wow. I want to think that I would have done the same thing, but I don't know if I would do the same thing, you know? What made him do this?
I can't help but think that he was modeling the behavior that he saw of the fugitives. Black men and women who ran from Virginia or points further south and made it to the north, that he saw their courage. He knew the tremendous risk that these people had faced making their way as fugitives. I can't help but think that that influenced his behaviors.
There's been a fight going on since the beginning of this country, and there's always people who have to fight. And one of my people fought.
He chose a side.
And I'm very pleased. I'm very proud of that.
And I think that it's clear that he stood up against the federal government. He stood up in the face of adversity. He risked everything to speak out.
I'm so happy. This is amazing.
Well, it's nice to have heroes.
It really is. It really is. When did he die?
He dies in 1879.
So he lived long
he
enough
lived-
to see the abolition of slavery.
He did.
That is so good. I wish I knew what he was thinking that day. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
You are welcome.
I'm a little shocked. I know I shouldn't be, because I had heard this as family lore that Francis Moyne was involved with the Underground Railroad, but to be here and actually see it and see the documentation at a moment in time in our modern history, when you realize the same moral questions are always being asked. This is a moment in our history when people feel that maybe they're not being heard, and it makes me have to question myself, you know, who do I want to stand up for? It's really, I'm really, really proud of my 3 times great-grandfather.